This Scale Model Basics sponsored by Hobby Zone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard to find modeling tools, and aftermarket modeling needs. Welcome to Scale Model Basics, I'm Tim Kidwell. One of the coolest things that you can do to spiff up your car model or an airplane model or an armor model is to wire its engine, if an engine is provided. And wiring an engine can be as easy or as hard as you want to make it. Let's choose the middling ground in this case. I'm going to use a 1/25th scale 283 small block as our example. For wire, there are companies out there that produce wire specifically for 1/24th and 1/25th scale models. I have on hand some Detail Master wire. You can get it in blue or black or a variety of different colors. I happen to have orange, so that's what we're going to use. And the first thing that you want to do is start with the distributor. What your distributor looks like depends on the individual kit. In this case, the distributor had very tall towers. If you're confronted with this, take a high grit sanding sponge or a sanding stick, 400 or 600 grit will work great, and sand those towers down so that you sand toward the bottom end. Do not eliminate them entirely, but what you want is the bottom end of those towers that will give you a more substantial place to drill. Once you've sanded down the towers and they're all even, take a number 2 pencil and using the side of the lead, just color the top of those towers. What that's going to do is highlight those towers so that you can see them more easily for drilling. Once the towers are highlighted, take a scribing tool, a sharp needle, or even a brand new number 11 hobby blade and start a pilot hole in the center of each of those towers. Then take a micro drill that is chucked in a pin vise and drill out those towers. Not all the way through, but just deep enough so that you can insert the wire into them and glue it with a little bit of super glue. And here's the distributor after the holes have been drilled and a coat of flat black paint. So we are now at the point where we can wire the distributor. You want to make sure that you have enough wire to play with and reach where the spark plugs are going to go, but you don't want too much out there that just becomes a mess. So in this case, about 1.5 inches is going to be plenty. Doesn't need to be exact, but keep them all relatively the same length. One word of warning, do not pre-cut all of your wiring. It may seem like it's going to save you time, but should something happen, like you sneeze at the workbench, those wires could just disappear. Dip the end of the wire into the super glue, and then insert it. Another method that you can use instead of dipping the wire into the super glue is to insert it first. Make sure it's down in there. And then with an applicator, just dot the super glue right at the bottom of the wire. Then come in with some accelerator and just touch it to the wire so that it wicks down and dries that super glue. Basically, you then just proceed all the way around your distributor. So here we are. This is our wired distributor. Now we're ready to go ahead and glue this guy onto the engine. Let's talk about where those wires are going to go, which is where the spark plugs are at on the sides of the block. Now, on here, I have this side already pre-drilled so that you can see where they're at. go to your references for the particular engine that you're building, because you do not want to mess up the locations of where these spark plugs are going to be, okay? If you do that after you drill, then you're gonna have to do some filling and some fixing. In this case, you can see where the spark plugs are placed on this particular engine. And so I have again used the number 80 drill bit, and I've drilled those areas out. You're gonna wanna do the same thing on the other side. First, you can take either a number 11 blade, sharp point, or a scribing tool and create pilot holes in the appropriate locations for the spark plugs. You can measure if you want, but I'm just gonna eyeball it. Once you've made those pilot holes, then you want to come back in with your drill bit and drill those holes out. Again, you want to just make it deep enough so that the wires sit in there firmly and ready for you to super glue them. You're also going to want to drill a hole at the top of your coil right here. At this point, we're ready to glue the distributor onto the top of the engine. And just make sure you get it positioned the way that you want it. And let it set up. Remember we were talking about how wiring an engine can be as complicated or as easy as you want it to be? We're going to take the middling ground. Well, this is where we get into a little bit of the complication, right? So every engine has a particular firing sequence. And if you want your engine to be accurate, what you're going to do is you're going to go find that firing sequence online. And just about every engine, you're going to be able to find the firing sequence online. Just so happens that the firing sequence for this particular engine is 1843652. And these are the cylinder numbers for this small block V8. So if you don't have the firing order pulled up on a computer next to you or you print it out, you can always sketch it out like this. And just make sure you draw your lines so that you can understand that this cylinder on the engine is wired to this tower on the distributor. And so 1 to 1, 8 to 8, 4 to 4, 3 to 3, and so on. Keep this handy, your diagram handy, when you are wiring your cylinders from the distributor. Once you have the distributor glued to the engine, what you're going to do, keeping your wiring diagram in mind, is start pulling the wires for these specific cylinders toward the correct side of the engine. So in this case, the wires for cylinders 1, 3, 5, and 7, we're gonna pull this way, and 2, 6, 4, and 8 toward the other side. Now, don't be too concerned when you realize that some of the wires on the distributor, they're on the opposite side of the distributor than they are on the engine. That's normal, they're just gonna cross to the other side. What we're also going to do is look at making some looms for those wires to keep things nice and straight, and then gluing them in. You can buy aftermarket looms for your 1/24th and 25th scale engines, or you can make them on your own. Now, some people I've seen use like Tamiya 1mm tape. I'm just gonna make some looms out of thin styrene strip. I'm gonna make 3 different kinds of looms. I'm gonna make one that collects everything up toward the top, so I'm gonna have a 4-hole loom, and then I'm gonna make 2 2-hole looms. All you need to do is just make some marks on your strip that are equidistant. Start your hole. Then, using the same number 80 drill bit in this case, but whatever drill bit that you've been using for the rest of the holes, you just use that drill bit to drill the holes for your loom. Nice and easy. Now what I like to do is just flip this over and go from the other side too, just to make sure that those holes are nice and clear. And then clean them up with the tip of a knife. The goal here is to make sure that your wires pass through the loom easily. You can pick it up with some tweezers and then thin it down and shape it to your liking. And in this case, I'm just going to take some off the edges here just to make it a little bit narrower, and then round these corners because I'm not looking to do anything special, just functional. So there's that loom. Now, using the same process, just make 2 more 2-hole looms. After looking at my wiring diagram, I have pulled the wires for cylinders 2, 4, 6, and 8 over to this side of the engine. I've got my loom here, and what I want to do is prevent crossover down here at the spark plugs. I don't want those wires crossing over, so what I'm actually going to do is, instead of putting 2 in this first hole, I'm going to put it in the second and put 4 in that first hole. And then what I'm going to do is pull through 8 and 6. Look at that. Look how easy that was. All right. And then all I'm going to do is just pull that loom up. Now, I'm just using that to keep my wires organized. The looms will help you keep your wires organized as you glue them into place on your engine. Just remember the correct order, and if you have to, refer to your diagram. The next step is to glue your wires onto the engine. And this, out of all of the steps, is the one where you're going to want to be most careful because you're trying to bend your wires into a pleasing shape, and there's nothing for this but to do it. You've drilled the positions on the engine. So all you can do now is just start looking at it and get these wires down here and go to work. Now I think there's enough slack on that wire to go ahead and give it and to glue it. So just come in and touch it with some super glue. And let that super glue just flow right down in there. And then you can come in with just a tad bit of accelerator and let it do its job. Then really it's just about, again, just moving your loom and shaping the wire the way that you want it for the next cylinder, and so on and so forth. And then I'm just going to hit that with some super glue, a tad bit of accelerator. And then what we do is we just pull the looms now into position, wherever it is that you want them to be. Like, that's not bad there. So I'm just going to come in and put a little bit of super glue in an innocuous spot just to hold those looms in place. And so there is the wired engine. So there are just a couple more steps. All you need to do is cut this wire to length and insert it into the coil. And your final step, should you want to do it, because remember, this is as complicated as you want to make it, but you could put spark plug boots on the ends of these wires. Now, I suggest using an acrylic paint, unthinned, like this Vallejo black. Use whatever color you want, but the acrylic paint unthinned, it's a little bit thicker, so it's gonna provide just a little bit of depth, and it covers really well. So all I'm gonna do is just get a little dot and just come right down here at the very bottom. All I'm trying to do is just add a hint. That's all I want, is just a suggestion that the spark plug boot is there. So there or the spark plug boots. And then, because this is also the time for you to go around your model and do a little bit of touch up, like up here around this part of the coil. And there you have it. That is how, with just a little bit of work and a little bit of patience, you can add some cool detail to your engines, be it an airplane engine or a tank engine or a car engine. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.